Yo, Wagwan. So, we got another Jordan Peterson video today. You know my dog Jordan Peterson be spinning them facts. Today we got an interview with Jordan Peterson and the roommates, and he's sharing why men are single today. Shocking reasons. Shocking reasons. I don't know what the reasons are, but they're shocking. So, without further ado, let's get right into the video.
To particularize your problem. Why can't men find women to date? That's not your problem. Your problem
Okay.
is why you can't find the woman you want.
Yeah.
And you have to assume that's your problem, because otherwise you have to assume that it's the women's problem. And really? They're all wrong and you're right. Really? Lucky you. Maybe you are. You're an undiscovered gem of some sort. Probably not.
Damn, dog. Why you gotta do me like that?
Did you see the recent article? I think a professor at NYU named Scott Galloway, I believe his name was, and he talked about how that there is a mating crisis going on in the Western world, and one of the reasons why he brought it up was that, you know, in the typical college and university, 60% of them is female, 40% of it is male, and a lot of the college-age females or college graduates who are females, they only want partners who are also college graduates. So have you seen that article, and then what are your thoughts about a mating crisis?
Well,
in the Western world?
what seems to be happening is that if male enrollment falls below a certain percentage, and it looks like it's something like 40%, then the females start not going too. And that's not surprising. I mean, really, of course. How many people meet their prospective mates in university or college? Like, well, pretty much everyone who goes that route. So it's not surprising that that would happen with young people.
Yeah.
And the fact that male enrollment is declining is, well, it's a shocking indictment of the education system in general. And the failure of boys all the way through the education system is the same thing, the increasing failure of boys. So, you know, I thought that part of it might be that girls will play boys' games, but boys won't play girls' games. So there's a bit of that going on with boys themselves, I think. But more
What do you
of
mean
it
by
is,
that, Dr. Peterson?
well, if a girl plays boys' games, she's admired by the girls and the boys. But if a boy plays girl games, well, he's not necessarily admired by the girls or the boys, right?
That's true.
Now, I don't mean I don't mean that boys shouldn't play with girls or something stupid like that.
Yeah.
That isn't what I mean. I'm trying to figure out this enrollment issue and what's going on. You know, and obviously, girls, for whatever reason, are being encouraged to value their education in a way that boys aren't. You know, and that's partly marketing and messaging as well, because girls are taught fairly consistently now that they should be their best self, and you know, the world needs more female power, and so on and so forth. And that's probably true, but the underlying message there is, well, instead of boy power and man power, not along with, but instead of,
Yeah.
because
Yeah, that's a very good point. So I talked about this in like a previous video, and this is part of the feminist rhetoric, right? And the idea is we're gonna be the biggest building in town by knocking down all the other buildings, instead of we're gonna be the biggest building in town by building the biggest building. So it's different. It's a different strategy. And I noticed a lot of feminists, especially today's modern feminists, use that rhetoric of the first part of knocking down all the buildings so their building is the tallest. So we see that come into today, where women are obviously encouraged to step up and be more productive and be more producers in society, but we're also seeing that at the detriment of men. Well, men are not as encouraged at the same rate, but women are encouraged in detriment to men, instead of both being encouraged to promote and push themselves into the producer category. And the point he made about college, right? College is a big piece, meeting people. That's what college is mainly about. So a lot of people go to college, yeah, for the degrees, for the certifications, for the status, whatever it is. But a big piece of college is meeting people, whether it's future business partners, whether it's connections down the line. And for a lot of people, especially women, meeting their future partners, future husbands, people that they can end up seeing long term. And it's the same, similar to high school. You met a lot of people, and a lot of the people you know now in those similar social situations. So college is primarily the same way. And so if men start to drop out of school, there's not really a bigger compelling reason for women to go to those colleges anymore, because one of the big social factors that they're going is gone. So if that's the case, you might as well go to an all girls school, or go take a certificate program, or an online degree, or whatever it is, instead of going to the actual physical college, because there would be no utility and no reason for you to go. That's what he was saying just now, and that is a big factor that's playing down in the long term, especially when the amount of women in college is overpowering the amount of men by 60-40. So if you're in college as a guy, the ratios are good for you, dog. Mwah, mwah. Whew. The ratios are just something else. But it's not as good for women who want to find a long-term partner.
If women ran the world, there'd be no wars. It's like, yeah, right.
Cap.
Yeah, right. You really think that? It's like, how dim can you possibly be to believe that? It's...
So something else I've been hearing, Dr. Peterson, a lot of young men have been sharing with me, and I'm not sure how much you've heard of it or experienced it. They've been sharing that, that they feel as though the average woman has no desire for the average male, and that because of things like social media, online dating, things along those lines, as well as just some of the female empowerment, where a lot of women have this is what they say, an elevated sense of self, that now they feel like they're above a lot of these average men, which also contributes to a disparity between young adults being able to connect and form meaningful relationships.
Yeah, well, women are more picky in their mate choices than men, especially sexually. That's the case in every culture. And it's not surprising, because women have more at stake sexually than men do, per episode, because men don't get pregnant, obviously. And so that female pickiness that's the case. That's definitely true. Whether it's worse now or not, I doubt if it is. I would say to young men who are irritated at women is, if you're irritated at women, as a class of creature, there's something wrong with you, because they're right. You're wrong. They're right to not pick you. If they're not picking you, it's because they're right.
Wow.
Now, that might get...
Interesting.
I know that's a terrible thing to say, and I know perfectly well. It wasn't like I was particularly successful with girls when I was young. So I know what that rejection is like. I know what that fear is like. I don't know it as well as some men know it, because I wasn't rejected outright. But what you have to understand is that, what do you expect from women? If you got pregnant because you had sex, you'd be pretty damn choosy too. So, clue in a bit. And then, well, don't they find you attractive? Well, maybe you're not. Like, have you paid attention to how you dress? Do you have a plan? Are you as educated as you could be? Are you a liar? Are you a rabid pornography user? Because maybe that's undermining your motivation to seek out a woman and grow yourself up. It's like, if you're rejected constantly and you're out there really trying, because that's another thing to ask yourself, is, well, how many women have you actually asked out? And are you so sure that you're not picking women who will certainly reject you because you're trying to bat out of your league? Because you might be. So, and I'm speaking about this as a clinician too, because I had plenty of men in my practice who were, radically unsuccessful with women. I had one man in particular. He was so afraid of women, he couldn't use the phone. He was too afraid of everyone to use the phone. And he had been bullied like mad. And And, you know, he had his problems. So I know what this is like. But pornography is a big problem. It's a big problem.
And before he even goes into that, I think he has a good point. And that's generally the harsh truth for most men, is that if you're not getting women, it's kind of your fault. You know what I'm saying? And that's where a lot of struggle comes from men. It's just the overwhelming pressure of things on their shoulders at all times. And it's kind of how do I even say this? It's kind of like nature basically is what Jordan Peterson is saying. Is like the nature is for the pressure to be on the man's shoulder, for the men to kind of level up and own up to be able to get the woman he wants. And obviously I advocate for that on this channel. Get in shape, make more money, get better in all aspects of life, and stack up those wins on top of each other to give you a better chance at getting the woman, right? But at the same time, I understand where a lot of men do fall short, because it is very serious competition. And especially with women being picky nowadays. Well, women have always been picky. That's just in the nature of women, right? But with the growing gap of the types of men women are choosing versus the types of men that there are, it's becoming increasingly competitive and increasingly difficult for men of like an average status, especially the lower status men, to really find someone to be with, because the women are funneling themselves into the top, right? And that's natural for women to do, but then again, it's also on the accountability of men to really figure out how they can get themselves into that top category of men and get the options that they so desire. So it's a lot of pressure, and the competitive nature of it falls on men. Women have their competitive aspects in their own fields, but you know, we're not getting into that as well. But there is competition for both sides, so we're not going to ignore that. But since we're talking about men have to really weigh those options in terms of competition. How can they be more competitive? How can they level up? How can they better themselves in a way that they have more options and push themselves into that higher category of men? So, as he was saying, in general, when it comes to this arena that we're fighting in, if we're not winning, we're wrong, right? And it's the same, it would be the same for women in their category, in the way their strategy is for getting the guy that they want. If they're not winning, they're wrong as well. But everyone's wrong if you're not doing the things to get the outcome that you desire. There's something that you could change, that you could be better at, that you could do differently to get further along on your path. So I completely see exactly what he's saying. Harsh truth, but it's the truth.
Problem. It's a real curse, that pornography.
Yeah, and pornography is dangerous as well.
Because it's an easy out, and so we don't know what the consequences of that are. We know, starting to understand some of them, but if you were better, you'd be more successful with women. Mm-hmm. So you have to have that in your mind, and they're not. You cannot be angry at women. It's stupid. Women, it's like women being angry at men. It's a sign of psychological trouble. That.
So you feel as though Dr. Peterson is that, you know, for the men who are complaining about the standards of women today and being elevated, that it's not so much a focus of pointing the finger at them not choosing them, but more so looking in the mirror and asking themselves what can they do to improve themselves to be so desirable, instead of focusing simply in on the inability of you know, what
be
you
a little
today.
stronger, be a little stronger, dress a little better, speak a little more clearly, aim a little higher, and practice that, you know, and that'll work. Now, you know, I know that that's more difficult for some people than others, because some people bear incredibly difficult developmental burdens. You know, and I'm not saying that this is easy, but I'm saying that it's a useful reaction. Like, what else are you going to do? What else are you going to do? Complain about women?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've seen that in men. I went out with a group of men who were having trouble with their wives, and they'd gone off to this like couples retreat, and it was mostly rubbish, although they were trying a bit to get their lives together. And I spent a whole day with them. There were 3 of them, and one of them was a guy that I'd known for quite a while, and every single word he said was a lie. And all these 3 did the whole day was complain about their wives. And I thought, what the hell's wrong with you guys? Like, you picked them. They're these women you picked, you know, and maybe they have their flaws, but they're your wives. And that's how you talk about them? And you think they're the problem? You're so dumb that you don't even know that you shouldn't badmouth your wife. Just because she's your wife. Like when Tammy and I got married, we had a discussion about that. It's like, she has her flaws and I have my flaws, but I'm her husband and she's my wife, and there's a certain respect that goes along with that category.
And this is like something that's important for guys to remember as well. It's like, especially like if you're on a date, like use this contextual example. If you're on a date, right, and they ask you, what do you think of your ex, right? What was, you know, your experience with your ex? And all you can say is negative things, bad things, and all the times that you hated whatever it is. That is obviously a big red flag, and here's why. Because at the end of the day, you chose that person. You chose to stay with that person, and you continue to stay with that person. So the person that you chose to stay with and be with and engage with shows the level of respect you have for yourself. So if you chose to stay with someone that you have all those negative feelings with, the negative emotions, all the hate and anger at the end of the day after you've let's say parted ways, you're showing the lack of respect you have for yourself. And you're lacking the context of like all the good times and the reasons you chose that person. So obviously this is not something you should talk about on a date. But the point is this: you choose those people, right? And when people badmouth their ex, right? I'm not a fan of it, and I don't badmouth any girl that I've been with, right? And if I do have to say something negative, right, just to give a contextual visualization, because maybe things weren't perfect, I'm not gonna just badmouth them and just only hit the negatives. I'd be also open to talking about the things I did wrong as well, about how I messed up or how I may have been influential in those situations, because it is a 2-person street, right? So especially in a situation where you're talking negatively about your wife, why are you with that wife if that's what the thing is? It's reflecting poorly on you as well. So, those are things that we have to keep in mind, especially when we're dealing with people and people who are looking from the outside in. It shows you lack respect for yourself, right? And this may be a rant, because this is something like a very focused, important topic for men. But at the same time, though, really, if you think about it, there's nothing else you can do besides practically trying to improve yourself to get the outcomes that you desire. We all know when it comes to business, we all know when it comes to fitness, we all know when it comes to any achievement in life, that complaining is not going to lead you to the outcome you desire. You can't complain about being fat if you're not willing to go to the gym. You can't complain about not having money if you're not practically taking steps to make more money, right? And it's the same thing. You can't complain about not having women if you're not practically improving yourselves and taking steps to get better with women. And I talked about this in my MGTOW video, right? It's going to be right here. I talked about this, and it was more of like a hard hitting, like emotionally charged like rant on that sense. But at the same time, it's like for the MGTOW guys, right? And this is why I don't support that. And but even though I understand it, I don't support it. But here's why. Instead of figuring out how you can adjust to the marketplace and how you can in turn improve yourself or improve certain aspects of your life to get the results you want, you decide, okay, I'm just not gonna get the results I want. I'm just gonna quit. I'm just gonna leave. I'm just gonna not be involved. And then what happens? You stay the same. You don't adjust, you don't improve, you don't get the results you want, and then you hold on to that bitterness for the rest of your life because at the end of the day, it wasn't worth doing anyways. That's like a person who's poor, right? They want money, but because they don't know how to get money or they're not improving themselves to get money, they're like, oh, fuck all the rich people. Fuck all the rich people with money. Fuck all the people who can afford to live the life they want. I'm just going to go my own way and be a bum. Does that make any sense in that context? It doesn't. It's the same way it applies into the realm of women. It makes no sense in that context. Now, obviously, women have changed, but on top of that, like Jordan Peterson was alluding to, it's on men to adjust and change to fit that marketplace, especially if we want to get the results we want. If the stock market changes, you have to change to adjust with the stock market. If the laws change, you have to adjust to change with those laws. Same thing in nature. Nature changes all the time. So we have to change with it to get the results we want and to survive, right? To survive. This is more about survival at the end of the day than anything else. So, regardless, let's get back in. This is going to be a long video.
If you have any sense. And so that's an extension of the same thing. You know, it's best to look to yourself. Now and then you can, you know, things have gone rotten in society and you have to bear your responsibility. You have to address that at a social level and a communal level. But fundamentally, it's like, and you do so much less harm if you look to yourself first as the problem. But then believe me, you're plenty of problem for you. You're all the problem you need for you. That's for sure.
So what would you say, Dr. Peterson, to the young men who are pushing back on this idea, and the young men who say, like, you know, traditionally speaking, there was a sort of mating where if you were a guy and you're a middle class, you can get a middle class partner. You're a guy making $40,000 a year, you can get a certain level of partner. That in some communities, in some environments, you know, because of, you know, degrees or things like that, if you're a guy, you know, making $50,000 a year or $60,000 a year, and you're doing relatively well, that the women in your cohort who are similar partners to you may not desire you. Instead of wanting a partner making 60, want a partner making 80. So what would you say to those guys?
Mostly I'd say that was an excuse, but I wouldn't go farther than that, because, you know, I don't know how to answer those questions in some ways at a collective level, which is why I focus on the individual. If someone came to me and told me that, the first thing I would do is listen to them for like 10 sessions, just to find out what they're thinking and to find out what the problem actually is, because they think they know what the problem is. You know, it's these picky women, and that could be the problem. You know, for them it might be. Maybe there's a demographic issue or community issue that I don't understand. So I wouldn't assume that I knew what the problem was, but those sorts of things, in my experience, have to be solved at a high level of detail, like at high resolution. So let's say you are having trouble finding a mate, you know, and you think, well, I'm reasonably symmetrical, I'm in decent physical condition, I'm young, I have a decent salary, but still, okay, well, that's a deep dive issue. I don't know what's wrong. We'd have to talk about that. And I do mostly listen. It's like, you seem okay. So why don't you have a partner? Well, that's a deep mystery. Like, it's really a deep mystery. It's nothing trivial. There's no simple solution to that. And so, again, that's why I don't really do sociology in some sense, you know, except insofar as I understand the role of the individual in relationship to society. You know, so I would say to someone like that, practically, if you want to do something, go see a cognitive behavioral psychologist and take the problem apart and strategize. That you'll figure out how to fix it.
That's good. That's good because
it's a serious problem, right?
Yeah, definitely a serious problem. And I think what ends up happening is that, like you said, too many people create a one-size-fit-all problem to to what they're going on. So they say, well, the reason I'm unsuccessful is because of A, but in reality, if you could talk to a wiser individual and sit down, you might realize that the problem isn't A, aka the women. Maybe the problem is that you're lacking confidence, you're lacking communication skill, you're picking the wrong kind of individuals, and there's a myriad of varieties of issues instead of just simply making it just a one-size-fit-all problem.
So there's a thing that I have to point out as well. There's always the battle between macro and micro, right? So in some cases they work together, right? The macro leads into the micro, and the micro leads into the macro. But in this sense, the strategy of micro versus macro is different, and I think he alluded to that as well, right? He definitely alluded to that. Let me even correct that. He definitely alluded to that, because to frame that all women are evil is not correct, right? And to really just put the blame on them is not correct either. The point is, the way to change the whole marketplace as a macro is something of a different strategy than to change yourself as an individual to get the results that you individually want. Because within the microstructure, there's all these different variables that are without your control, that you don't have control over. And there's all these different factors and all these different reasons. But the only thing you can do as an individual is to individually figure out what details do I need to fix to get from point A to point B. And if enough people, enough guys, let's say in this situation, do that, then that will ultimately influence and change the macro view. But you can't change the macro view without changing the micro first. So we need to focus on the individual, and men need to focus on themselves in a way where they figure out how to overcome their issues instead of obsessing about the whole macro issues, right? Now, I talk about the macro issues as more of like an awareness tactic for men to lead them down the path of like, cool, you need to improve yourself to get the results you want, but you can't rely on depending on the whole macro overall scope of things to base your judgment on. You can only base your judgment on how you operate your individual life. So if you can compare a guy without success to a guy with success, the guy with success with women is not complaining about women. You get what I'm saying? The guy that's in the top tiers, the top ranks, and he has the options because he's developed himself and built himself to a certain status, is not worried about the macro state of the whole situation about women, because he knows, cool, as an individual, he's getting the results that he sought after. But the one who generally has problems and who complains about it the most are the ones who are not getting the results that they're looking for, and don't know how to get the results that they're looking for because they're not improving themselves. So the whole journey starts at a micro scale where you can look at an individual with details and work and tweak those details like knobs on a machine, and turn the levels up or turn the levels down and adjust the levels to where it matches to a point where, cool, these are the results I want, and these are the results I'm getting. And if enough men do that, then you can bring it back on a macro scale to a more feasible and maintainable standard for society, right? So in a way, and I've always thought this, right? Now, like I said, this is a long rant, so I need you to stay with me. Men are more of the structure. Women are more of the free-flowing, wild, crazy kind of energies, right? If you think of the difference between masculine and feminine. Feminine is more of like the free flowing, crazy waters of a river, right? The masculine is like the more structured, organized, planned banks of a river. So obviously, the goal of the masculine, right, is to kind of contain the crazy chaos of the other party, right? The goal of the banks of the river is to contain the water within that river and to direct it. And if men are not in tune with the direction they're going and the structure of the banks of the river, the water will overflow and overwhelm that river and spill everywhere. And we need that structure in place. Without that structure, we get flooding, we get chaos, we get all types of things that are not beneficial to either party. So, if we think about it, water is powerful. In this case, I'm talking the feminine. Water is powerful, right? But it's mostly powerful when it's concentrated. If you concentrate water into a laser, it can cut through any rock. But if water is just splashed on a rock, it's not going to have any power. And the same thing, without energy, a structure and a funnel is pointless. There's nothing for it. So you need energy within the banks of the river. Because if there was no water in that river, what's the point of having the banks of the river? There's no point. So you need structure, you need banks to guide that water, to channel that energy into a direction you want it to go. And men need to build up their structure so they can be able to hold the water in the river. So individually as men, build your structure. Build the structure you want for your life. Build the structure you want for yourself. Build the structure you see as your vision. And then allow the water to come in and fill that vision and help you channel your vision towards where you want it to go. Hopefully that made sense to to everyone. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's also in some ways a lot less depressing to particularize like that, because you find out a bunch of problems you don't have, right? So you can just those aren't my problems. Turns out my problem is this, and then that might be non-trivial, and it probably is, but at least it's not everything, right? And I also think that when we talk about things like climate change, it's like, well, really, there's no such thing as the climate. It's not a useful word when you're trying to solve a problem. And what do you mean by change exactly? Like these are really low resolution concepts, and all the solutions are high resolution. And it requires particularized expertise to solve some genuine actionable problem. You have to decompose the problem. And then you have to be satisfied with addressing some micro element of it. There's no fixing climate change. That conceptually, it's just an indication of unsophisticated thinking. That's all it is. And then there's an insistence. Well, climate change is real. Well, what do you mean by real? What do you mean by change? What do you mean by climate? How much do you know about climate? And I'm just picking on that because it's a real overgeneralization. It's not helpful. Yeah. And when you talk to real experts, they've particularized. So I'll give you an example. Glenn Schellenberger, I hope I got that right. I just talked to him. He wrote this book recently called Apocalypse Never. And he was a climate activist, eco-activist for a long time. But you know, he kept delving into things and particularizing them, and then he wrote this book. And one of the things he said was, he talked to an MIT scientist who said, if you want to knock carbon dioxide emissions down, the best thing to do would be to work to help India burn more coal. It's like, who would guess that except a particularized expert? The reason for that is that it's better than wood. And it's a pathway on the way to natural gas and perhaps nuclear. But it's not obvious, because in the short term it makes the problem worse, or it seems to. And so that's particularized knowledge. And you have to particularize your problem. Why can't men find women to date? That's not your problem. Your problem is why you can't find the woman you want. Yeah. And you have to assume that's your problem, because otherwise you have to assume that it's the women's problem. And really? They're all wrong and you're right. Really? Lucky you. Maybe you are. You're an undiscovered gem of some sort. Probably not.
No, that was really powerful, Jordan Peterson. I love the call always back to accountability. And so as one who's been married for so many decades, I think one of the challenges a lot of men do is they aim for the wrong women, or they pick the wrong women. So in your personal experience from your years of marriage, and there's also years of study, what would you say are things that men need to be focusing in on when it's trying to select a woman for a long-term marriage partner?
Well, you want someone honest. That's really, really important. Someone who will do her best to tell the truth. And my wife swore she'd do that before we got married, and she has. Probably better than I have. And so that's a rock, man, at the bottom of things, you know. So and you can't underplay the role of sexual attraction, and that's a mysterious thing, and so that's crucial as far as I'm concerned, and can't be. So
just, I have a real question about that, Jordan Peterson, Dr. Peterson. So you mentioned pornography, and we do countless pieces of content to be able to help young men overcome that issue and provide tons of resources to help them support them. So what I've noticed that happens sometimes is because of years of watching pornography, the men's sexual attraction becomes warped. And so how can a man whose sexual attraction to women has become warped to the extreme ends due to so much consumption of pornography, how can that man go back to now being attracted to, more natural looking women, or more women that could be around their lives instead of the projected?
Well, deprivation is helpful.
Yeah.
So I think it's reasonable to assume that there's a novelty edge in pornography, like there is in so many quasi-addictive.
All right, so basically we covered a lot of topics in this video. It's kind of hard to really go back in and just really focus in on one topic again. But at the end of the day, the main point that I want to talk about, or that I want you to leave with, actually, because it's not really about me. It's about, you as the guy watching this, or whoever is watching this per se, is more of the stance of accountability, right? Individual sovereignty and accountability. We can't always change the macro things in life. We can't always change how the world is set up. And one person trying to take on the world is already a losing battle. So what you can do is focus on what you can control within your sphere of influence. And to max out all the scales in your own life so that you have as much leverage as possible to get the results you want. And then from then on, you can use that leverage to go ahead and influence other people, influence other guys, or influence your family down the line to do the same, to max out every aspect of your life. And the key to that is to take in massive accountability for everything that happens in your life. Every result, every area of your life is within your control, whether you may think so or not. Because who's the one living your life? You are. And who's the one that wants these certain things? You do. So who's responsible for changing them? You are. So that's basically it. The word of the day is accountability. So be sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, and as always, stay official. Peace.